Thanks.
All
It's
right.
going. Okay.
All right, guys, great. We're recording now. So Ollie, as I was saying, since you are, currently participating in ROTC at George Washington University, and we'd like to gather some more information as far as how you got there, what your thought process, even to think about applying for ROTC, then what did it take to get into ROTC? And by the way, kind of give us some of the jewels of things you wish you would have known, because that will be really helpful. And then basically, how is it going? How are you liking the experience?
Okay, awesome. So I'll try not to take too long with it. So I think the big thing for me was I just knew I wanted to join the military in some fashion. And I think that's the big thing for anyone going into any military program, is to make sure that it's what you want to do regardless of what benefits it offers and stuff like that. So I knew coming out of high school that I wanted to join the military, so I was willing to enlist or go to one of the academies or join ROTC. And then for me, it was about kind of picking a branch to join with. And I eventually settled on the Marine Corps just because I really liked what they offered and kind of the environment that they exist in.
Can you?
But I mean, no branch is really better or worse than any of the other ones.
Okay.
But yeah, I settled on the Marine Corps. And so my plan was basically to enlist because I didn't know anything about ROTC or the academies at the time. So I kind of walked into the recruiter's office, and one thing to know though is if you do go to the recruiter, their job is kind of to enlist you. So they're not going to push you to do ROTC or the academies. So if you kind of do have any people that are talking to a recruiter, just know like the recruiter's job is to enlist you, not necessarily to push you towards ROTC. So that's something that I wish I knew, because they were really pushing me to right after high school, go to boot camp. And now I know kind of why that is. But yeah, I kind of learned about ROTC on my own. I guess I talked to a couple of other students at Monarch who were also applying for it. And basically the program is you go to a 4-year college, and you will have tuition paid for by ROTC to do that. And you will enter the military after you graduate from college. And you'll serve in the military for between 4 and 8 years, depending on what they're paying for you to do. So for the Marine Corps, it's usually 4 years. But if you want to be a pilot, because of the extra training that you need, it's an 8-year commitment.
Okay.
And so I think the important thing for me was that it was always about the fact that I wanted to serve afterwards. So going to college is kind of a benefit. Being able to get an education is a benefit, but the desire to want to join the military and have service be a part of my life came first before any of that. And I think that's an important thing for anyone wanting to do ROTC. Yeah, just because it's not an easy program to get into. It's not an easy program necessarily to be a part of all the time. And there is a service requirement after you graduate. So there are easier ways just to get college paid for if that's all someone is hoping to get out of it. So I think that's something to consider as well.
That's great advice, Ollie.
Yeah.
So oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, so what ROTC is basically is it's just a college program that is a stepping stone to joining the military. So you'll be doing training with the ROTC unit that's attached to your school several days a week. There's what we call PT, which is basically workouts that you do with the unit. We have something called Leadership Lab every Friday, and I think that's the same with all ROTC units. And there's just general military education for the Marine options. In Navy ROTC, we have field exercises where we go to the Marine base at Quantico and we learn things like land navigation, We run the obstacle course up there and the endurance course. So it takes up a good amount of time, definitely several hours each week, sometimes more than that.
Okay.
Hey,
And-
Ollie, I have a question on that.
Yeah.
If the person is in a fairly rigorous, I mean, all college is rigorous, but let's say they're in an engineering program, in a nursing program, would you say it's still doable, like with all programs, to do it with that?
I would say it's not only doable, but in some cases it's going to be necessary. So this isn't the case for the Marine Corps, but if one wants to do this in the Navy, they will require that you join and your major has to be accepted from a list of majors, which they call tiers. So to have the scholarship, you have to be in a tier 1, 2, or 3 major. And so tier 1 majors are engineering majors that the Navy directly has a need for. So aerospace engineering, mechanical engineering, nautical engineering, I don't know exactly what it is, but that kind of thing. Tier 2 would be other STEM fields, so mathematics and I guess engineering that maybe they don't have a job that directly relates to. And then tier 3 is mostly languages, languages that the Department of Defense sees that they'll need to have people able to be fluent in the future.
So would tier 1 include medical, like nursing in that?
So for the Navy, we have something kind of separate, which I don't know a lot about, which is nurse options. And we do have people in my ROTC unit that are nurse options. I don't know exactly what their academic profile is and what their responsibilities are for the unit, but they definitely exist. But I think the way you get into ROTC is different from how I did it. And I'm not exactly sure what that is. But there is definitely nurse options.
Great, thank you.
So, and Ollie, can you tell us a little bit about that leadership lab? Is that something you said every Friday you guys do leadership lab? What is that?
So leadership lab is kind of a time, we set about 3 hours aside every Friday morning, and we use that as a period for kind of personal growth. We have mentorship time that we basically build into it, where younger midshipmen are paired up with older midshipmen, and you go through different exercises with them. They just kind of pass on what they've learned to you. We hear from guest speakers a lot during leadership lab. We've done teamwork exercises and war games during that time too. Just, they basically fill it with whatever they feel would be a good use of your time to increase your leadership skills, to make you better at critical thinking, to broaden your horizons by bringing in guest speakers from, I mean, being in Washington, we get a lot of speakers from the Pentagon and kind of government, which is nice. I don't know in other areas what kinds of things they would bring in for that, because they don't have the same resources in other parts of the country.
Right.
That makes sense. You know, in addition to leadership lab, do you guys actually have to take courses like that have professors that are basically, you know, your general military education?
Yes, so that was the kind of final piece of the puzzle there, is the naval science courses. So in Navy ROTC, we have something called naval science. And every semester I've had to take one course of 3 credit hours in naval science. And so the courses differ every semester in what they teach. So the first semester was kind of just a general overview of what the military is, customs, courtesies, and traditions of the Navy and the Marine Corps and their structure. The second semester of my freshman year, the naval science course was a history course, basically the history of the US Navy.
Nice.
And last semester was a leadership and management course that was basically all leadership and management skills and strategies and how you would fit that in as an officer. Because as an officer, you'll be in charge of enlisted sailors and Marines. And this semester is a Marine only class. And we're again talking kind of about the evolution of warfare and the history of warfare, but it's more general. So not just about the United States, but now we're looking at a lot further back, and how weapons and tactics have changed over time. So that's this semester. And they keep changing every semester until the end of your senior year when you take a class in ethics. And that's the final naval science class.
That is great.
That is awesome. I mean, everybody should have that, right?
I do think it's a really good education. I'm really looking forward to the ethics class specifically, because I know they talk about a lot of really interesting things. And I've heard, bits and pieces from the seniors about what they discuss in that class. And it sounds really interesting. It's a discussion-based class, so I'm looking forward to taking that.
That's great.
And you can get a minor in naval science, and you're required to take the courses. So it's kind of like a free minor, I guess.
Are you going to do that?
I'd like to. There's no reason not to. I just have to get around to going and declaring it. So.
The one thing I'd love for you to clarify, you've been talking about this naval science, but then you were talking about the Marines. So when I think of naval science, I think of, and maybe it's just because of the name, the Navy. And so for some reason I went down the path that you were doing Navy, but then you mentioned Marine again. So can you explain why?
Yeah, so I kind of breezed over that, and that's my bad. So the Marine Corps and the Navy are actually connected. So the Marines are a department of the Navy.
Okay.
So they're separate branches, but they're in the same department. And so becoming a Marine officer requires that I join Navy ROTC, and Navy ROTC encompasses both the Navy and the Marine Corps. So the same, but kind of on different paths. You can be a Navy option or a Marine option within Navy ROTC.
Got it.
And what is your option? Are you Marine option or Navy option?
Yes, I'm a Marine option.
You're Marine option. Okay, gotcha. Perfect.
So cool. I learned something new. Yay.
That's incredible. That's great. All right. So that was great information. So let's talk about when you first started thinking about doing the ROTC program, what were the steps you needed to take? And again, any advice you can give students as far as maybe some things to make it smoother for them, things you wish you would have known going into this?
So at this point, I can really only talk about the Marine application process, because there's a different one for the Marines and the Navy, and also for the Air Force and the Army. But so for me to join, I found out about the program during my senior year of high school. And so that's when I started my application. Although it might honestly be a good idea to start a little bit earlier than that, maybe in your junior year or your summer before senior year starts to do.
How early can you start actually? What's the...
So the application itself, you can't turn in until you're a senior in high school, but there's a lot of pieces of it that are, especially the physical fitness component, that will be good to work on beforehand. So that application includes, I wrote a couple things down because I didn't want to forget them. It's kind of a general application. There's a written statement and an interview with an officer, but there's also a physical fitness test and a medical exam. And so it definitely is a good idea to start working on the physical fitness test a long time before you take it. So for the Marines, it's a 3-mile run, and you have to do pull-ups and you have to do crunches. So it's kind of a simple test, but the requirements are pretty extensive. So in order to score well, you have to be able to do 20 pull-ups.
Oh, wow.
120 crunches, if I remember correctly. And to get a perfect score on the run, you have to run 3 miles in 18 minutes.
Oh, what?
Wow. Okay.
So you don't necessarily have to get a perfect score, but if you don't, it hurts your chances of getting the scholarship. So the closer you can get to perfect, the better. So if you're not a runner necessarily, it definitely would pay in your junior year of high school to work on your running ability, because if you wait until your senior year to start getting ready, the month before you take the test, it's kind of too late to really improve what you need to do.
Yeah, good point.
So that's something I really wish I knew before I started, because basically the score on the physical fitness test for the Marine Corps is about half of the application.
Wow.
So your grades, your interview, and your written statement are about half, from what I understand, and your score on the physical fitness test is pretty much the other half.
Oh my gosh.
And
What
the
do you
first,
Oh, go ahead.
so there's multiple application boards, and the first time I hadn't really prepared super well for the test because I had only learned about this in my senior year of high school. So it was just my senior year when I was trying to get faster at running, get better at doing pull-ups, and be able to do more crunches. And so the first fitness test I took, I did not score that well on. I think I got like a 225 out of 300, which is not very high. And it definitely wasn't good enough to get the scholarship. I would say for someone applying for the scholarship, a competitive score is above 270. So I got a 225 on the first one and I didn't get it. But there are multiple boards, so I applied again for the last board. And I brought my score up into the 290s and I got that one, luckily.
That's great.
But you would want to try and get it on the first board
Yeah.
if possible, because out of the two boards, if you leave it to the last one and you don't get it, then you kind of missed your chance. So
What's the time frame on those, Ollie? Is it like, is it like in August, October? Like, can you remember it all?
So for the Marine Corps, you'll be working with an officer. You basically start the application online on Navy.mil. It's the first website that comes up if you look up Navy ROTC application. And you'll create an account and it'll have all the steps listed and it's kind of a checklist. And you'll get kind of assigned an officer who's going to work with you to complete the package. And the first board, I can't remember exactly when it meets, but I think I had to do everything for it before the end of September.
Okay, for the first one.
If I'm remembering correctly,
Yeah.
for the first board. And the second board, I think I had to do everything before the end of December.
That's tough because you were obviously in marching band, and then you were starting indoor percussion. That's a lot.
Yeah, I was pretty busy my senior year of high school trying to get everything together. But it ended up working out, luckily.
You did.
So
Yes, that's great. That's great. And what about the written statement? What was that? What does that entail?
it's basically a 3-page, if they haven't changed it, it's 3 pages, single spaced. So I don't know if it's longer or shorter than the Common App essay, but you go over your desire to serve. So why you want to do this,
Right.
How this is going to help you, and why you see yourself as a good leader, maybe. They kind of leave it open-ended in some ways. You kind of give a little bit of a biography about your own life at the end and kind of how it led you to this.
Love it.
The full criteria, I think they provide. I don't know if it's on the website or if you only get it when you're writing the essay.
Gotcha.
But the Navy.mil website is really good. It provides a full checklist of what you need.
That's fantastic. And obviously the interview, did you prep for that, or did you just, did you kind of know what questions they were going to ask you before you had the interview itself?
I didn't know what questions they were going to ask, and I didn't really prep for it. So I sort of did. I brought in the same kind of skills and preparation that I did for the Naval Academy interviews, because I don't know if you've talked to the Lyles, you know kind of how the academy process works, getting nominations and stuff.
Exactly. I didn't realize you did that, Ollie. Did you actually get, a nomination and apply to Naval Academy?
Yes, so I did get a nomination. I think it was from Michael Bennett.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, he's the senator.
Yep.
And I don't know if I put in the application and didn't get it, or if I just decided to do ROTC. But the nomination interviews, what I do remember is the nomination interviews are very similar to the ROTC application interviews. So for me, there were multiple officers there for my ROTC interview, and they pretty much just shoot questions at you.
Oh my gosh.
And so the difficult part in the interview is just to stay kind of calm and composed and give a good answer,
Right.
even when multiple people are kind of throwing conflicting questions at you. If you kind of contradict yourself, they'll come at you about it.
Oh my
So
God.
you just have to be confident with the reason that you're there. What they're looking for is someone who is joining for the right reasons. So you're joining because you want to be a part of the military as an organization, not just because you want them to pay for your college. And that you kind of share the same values. So I would say it's important to be honest in the interview, because if you try and portray something that isn't true, they'll probably catch it.
Mhm.
At the same time, you do want to portray yourself well. So to be aware of what they might be looking for and kind of push your answers in that direction is always a good idea. So in the Marine Corps, they really value loyalty, community, commitment, and honor and integrity. So discussing why those values are important will probably come up in the interview at some point. But yeah, I mean, the hardest part of the interview is really just, it's pretty long. So it's just staying focused, giving good answers, and staying calm, because you'll have multiple people asking you things most likely. So
Wow.
the interview, I felt like it was intimidating at the time, and I didn't know if I did well on it or not, but I did get the scholarship in the end, so it worked out.
Yeah, I'm sure they're pretty stone-faced. It's not like interviews, civilian interviews, where they're trying to make you feel comfortable and, you know, yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty stone-faced. From what I remember, walk in, no smiles.
Oh my
Good
God.
afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad I don't have to do it again, for sure.
You're like done. So
Yeah.
what are you majoring in? Is it econ? I can't remember.
Yeah, so I'm an econ major,
I thought, perfect.
and so quantitative economics is a major that they accept for tier 2 for the Navy. So I can't remember what the full list is. I can, if you want me to send you the links to a couple of these things, like the majors tier list and stuff like that, I can do that, because I remember where that is.
That would be awesome, because then we can attach it as a reference doc.
Yeah,
Yes, definitely.
great.
But I'm an econ major, and it turns out I didn't know this at the time, and I do kind of wish that I did. In the Marine Corps, they don't actually require you to have a major that is in one of the tiers. So I could major in anything that I want. But that is not the case for the Navy. So that's kind of a only in the Marine Corps thing. And I'm not sure about the Army and the Air Force, what their requirements are.
So you're basically, but quantitative economics is tier 2 because it's considered a STEM related
Yes.
major. Absolutely. So data analytics, you've gone well beyond math in your Calc BC now, linear algebra, multivariable calculus, all these kind of things, I'm sure, are things that you have to do now.
Yeah, a little bit beyond it. I think for all the Navy options, regardless of major, they will require that you take 2 semesters of calculus and 2 semesters of physics.
Perfect.
Regardless of your major.
Okay, so if you're, I had no idea. So regardless, 2 years or 2 semesters of calc, 2 semesters of physics. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. And here's the thing is, so just if people are listening to this recording, I just want to put in context what kind of student you were or you are, Ollie. I mean, you were taking all the highest level math, science, and English courses that were possible at your high school. I just know this of you, and you were extremely involved year round in extracurricular activities. You were a very, very busy man. So I have to say, I think that the Navy, Marine, they're so lucky to have you. Really, really lucky to have you.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm definitely lucky to have this opportunity. So luckily it worked out for me. Hopefully I can add something to the organization. But
You
yeah,
definitely can. So Merrie, any other questions? Because I can stop the recording at any point.
Um, so we've talked about the application process. We've talked a little bit about what you do with it. Can you talk a little bit more about what you perceive you're going to do with it? And I think one question I had written down was, so what you'll do with it. And then the second, and you may not know that, the second is what happens if you don't graduate?
so yeah, those are really good questions. For me, what ROTC is opening the door for is a career in the Marine Corps, hopefully. And so that could involve pretty much doing any job that the Marine Corps has. So that could exist in, it ranges from the infantry to the armor to intelligence fields. There's fields in logistics and administration. So those are all open after you graduate from college. What I personally want to do is in the aviation fields, I want to be a pilot. And so this is going to open the door for me to be able to do that, I hope. So I'm still waiting to hear back from my aviation specific application. If you don't graduate from college, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, and it's kind of going to be, it's going to depend on the reason that you don't graduate.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something that's out of your control, likely you'll definitely be disenrolled from ROTC if you're not at college anymore. But there's a possibility that you will have to pay back their government's contribution to you.
Okay.
So generally, I haven't seen that happening. And if it's a situation that's out of your control, they usually will be forgiving about that. So I've seen it happen where people come in and then they receive an injury while they're in college that disqualifies them from being able to serve in the military.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not their fault that that happened to them.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, they are going to be disenrolled from ROTC, but the tuition that was paid for already by ROTC and the benefits they received, they won't have to pay those back. But if you get to the end of college and you decide you don't want to finish college, or you just do want to graduate from college, but you don't want to be a military officer and you want to withdraw from ROTC, if you make that decision, they are going to decide, or they are going to ask for you to repay the tuition that they covered.
Okay, so I have a couple, thank you, that was very clear. A couple questions. So you talked about being an officer. Are you automatically an officer when you graduate and you go through this program? You go
Yes.
in as an officer, right?
Yes. So,
and then, go ahead.
Oh, yes. So the whole ROTC program is an officer commissioning program.
Okay.
So the purpose of joining ROTC is to commission as an officer.
Okay. And then you don't have to, because you've been doing all this physical, you don't have to go into the boot camp again, right? That part's done, right?
So yes. I do not have to go to boot camp. I do have to go to officer candidate school. That's Marine specific. So in the Navy, they don't have to do anything like that. They basically just get to the end of college, commission, and become an officer. In the Marine Corps, they do require that you go to officer candidate school, which is, it's not boot camp, but it's somewhat similar in some ways. It's like a 6-week course that you go to over the summer, and that's between junior and senior year of college.
And is there a physical component to that 6 weeks?
Yes, that's pretty much mostly what it is. It's almost all physical. They grade you on your physical and kind of leadership abilities there.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And then, what was going to ask? Oh, so you were saying you were hoping to go into the pilot program, the aviation. Let's say you weren't, because it sounds like that's a pretty selective tier type of program, and you can correct me on terminology, but when you get out, I think a fear would be for people like, they're going to put me in infantry, or they're going to put me on the front line. do you have any ability to choose the position that you go into? I mean, is it like going out and applying for the different openings and jobs, or are they like, nope, we need you in the kitchen, or we need you, I mean, wherever, right?
Yeah, so for the Marine Corps, what they do is if you're not going into kind of a specialized aviation field, you go to this program after you graduate from college. It's called the Basic School. It's like a 6-month course where they analyze all of the new Marine officers who have just graduated from ROTC, and you get ranked you get ranked within your class, and they look where you have aptitude.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's very unlikely that someone would be placed in infantry or kind of any combat arms kind of front lines positions if they don't ask for it, just because it's such a selective field as it is that a lot of people who want to do that don't even get accepted to it.
Oh,
At the same time, though, you might not get your first choice. They ask you what your preferences are, but there's a limited number of spots for each job. So there's a limited number of intelligence jobs and a limited number of jobs in logistics. So if everybody wanted to do that, not everyone would get their first choice.
mm-hmm.
But they do ask about preferences, and they generally try and put you where you want to be. So it might not be your first choice, but you'll get your second choice or something like that. So
Great. Thank
they
you.
definitely ask your preference, but you might not get your first choice.
That's awesome. Thanks for that clarification. So you talked about being career military. So, we can't see the future, but do you anticipate retiring from the military? Like, you want to make it your full career and just have different job titles and roles and be promoted up through the ranks? And if that's the case, do you have an ultimate dream or wish that you hope to aspire to?
Well, right now, my hope is just to get the aviation allocation and do that. So that would be an 8-year commitment. And so 8 years plus 2 years of flight school. So really 10 years
Wow.
after college. And at that point, I can definitely see myself making it a career. If I didn't get aviation, I don't exactly know what I would do. I think I would have to just join the Marine Corps and pick another job and see how I liked it. And after 4 years, kind of reassess where I'm at.
Nice.
And if after 4 years I liked it enough to stay in, I would stay in. And if I decided there was something more exciting outside of the military, I would consider getting out potentially.
Well, I love to hear that. I mean, just your openness. And one of the things Merrie and I do with our students is we really talk about what's your ultimate aspiration, right? Because if you can visualize that, you have a much greater chance of attaining that than if you're just not clear. So you may not get to that 100% spot, but let's say you get 90% there or 80, you're still further ahead than you were before. So dream and visualize about that, because we know that that affirms actions into that. And then the other is you're learning so much about your attributes, your behaviors, your interests, right? This mechanism they've created, they're taking you through, is going to bring self-reflection, and you're going to start really knowing. And so just stay true to that, because that's a lot of what we do. We start with a very small assessment with our students, and we do it with everyone, even if they feel like they know themselves or they know what career or degree they want to go into, because for us, it's all about self-learning and awareness. And you've gone through the American school system, and so consequently, we've told you what we want you to think, right? And so you're now at a point in your life where you're like, I like that. I don't really like that. I'm good at that. No, I'm not great at that. And knowing that about yourself and being true to that when you have a choice is going to be really important for you. So just tuck that away. But I think that, we're honored that you would serve us, and that I loved how you started with, don't do it for the wrong reasons, because we know what a hardship it is, and you probably wouldn't do well. So thank you for the time. And Merrie, thank you for setting this up, because I learned a lot, and this is going to be really helpful for us, for our students. I just have one last quick question I thought of. Do you see gender well represented, or do you just still feel like between male and females, or it's a fairly male-dominated group?
I think that's a really good question. There's a lot of good opportunities for both males and females, but unfortunately, it is a relatively male-dominated program. The Navy is more balanced than the Marine Corps, but it is pretty male-dominated. I think generally we create a pretty good environment, and a lot of the female midshipmen I'm really good friends with, and I think we create a good environment for everyone. But I think just when it comes down to the number of people who apply, mostly men are applying for it, so it ends up being a male-dominated program. I think they're trying to change that, so hopefully we'll see some positive changes in the future. But I don't know. They've been talking about that for a while, and change is kind of slow. But hopefully in the future it'll become more balanced. But if there was kind of an issue with the demographics, it is definitely very male dominated, especially in the Marine Corps. So that's something I wouldn't say that's, terrible or, a reason not to do it, but it's something to consider and to be aware of.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you. But, it reflects corporate, right? The higher you go up in corporate. So, and we're all trying to change that and grow and keep the balance. So I'm done, Merrie. I don't have any other questions. Do you have any?
Daisy just did answer so many questions. I learned a ton as well. Thank you, Ollie. Thank you so much for, spending the time with us. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Talked about how if you do decide not to do ROTC, that you'd have to pay them back what they paid to you in tuition and housing, scholarship benefits, and monthly stipends. You have a year of forgiveness. So your freshman year, if you try it and you don't like it, you can get out and you won't owe them money. They'll still pay for your first year of college. And you can withdraw from the program, and I don't know, it's kind of like freshman forgiveness or something.
Wow.
So
very generous.
you have that for your first year as an option, but after that, if you decide in your sophomore through senior year that you don't want to do it, you'll have to pay them back. So I thought that was important to know, because if someone's not sure and they want to try it out first, that is an option. So I think that's something I wanted to make sure I said before we got off of this.
And we know you're not a rep for ROTC, and we're going to say that online. You are a student, and this is a student's perspective. And what we're trying to do, Ollie, is trying to gather unique circumstances that students are not aware of in high school, right?
I had no idea about this program.
Right. You don't know what you don't know, right? And same with like the nursing program. We're trying to create actual videos of students that have gone through it. We had one that works on the Senate floor, and he talked about